What if I told you that the serpent mentioned in Genesis was not, in fact, a literal serpent? That everything you thought you knew about the story of Adam and Eve might need a deep and dramatic reconsideration? Imagine that this story, so deeply rooted in tradition, requires a radical re-examination. Brace yourself, because the truth may be even more fascinating than you ever imagined. The narrative of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden is one of the most well-known and widely discussed within the Bible, being one of the pillars of Western religious thought. At the heart of this story is the figure of the cunning serpent, who persuades Eve to eat the forbidden fruit, an action that triggers the so-called fall of humanity. Traditionally, this serpent is seen as a literal snake, a creature associated with deceit, temptation, and ruin. However, what if we had been interpreting this figure incorrectly all along? What if the serpent is not exactly what we have always believed it to be? In this video, we will delve into the original Hebrew scriptures of the book of Genesis to reveal a hidden truth that may drastically challenge our traditional interpretation of this biblical narrative. We will analyze word by word, revisiting the sacred text with a renewed perspective, and by the end, you will see this story in a new light. As we revisit the story of Adam and Eve with new interpretative lenses, we discover nuances that can enrich and broaden our understanding, not just of this story, but also of the role that divine figures play in humanity's development and its quest for knowledge. The book of Genesis, the first in the Bible, is a work of enormous historical and spiritual relevance, not only for Judaism but also for Christianity. It is a primordial text whose impact resonates through millennia of religious and philosophical thought. Traditionally attributed to Moses, this book contains stories that have shaped the spirituality and morality of billions of people over time. Among these stories, the narrative of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden holds singular importance, as it addresses profound questions related to innocence, temptation, and the human condition. To truly understand the nature of the serpent, we need to return to the roots of the original Hebrew text of Genesis. In Genesis 3 verse 1, the serpent is introduced with the Hebrew word Naash. This word is widely translated as serpent or snake in most common English translations of the Bible. However, Hebrew is an extremely rich and complex language, with layers of meaning that often get lost in simplified translations. The word Naash can indeed mean serpent, but its meaning is not limited to that. Depending on the context, Naash can also refer to a diviner or someone who practices sorcery. This ambiguity opens the door to a completely new interpretation of the true identity of the serpent in the Eden narrative. Over the centuries, scholars have debated the true meaning of this word and its implication in the story. Rather than simply a literal serpent, the word Naash may imply a being with deep knowledge or even supernatural powers. This possibility opens the field to interpretations that challenge the traditional reading of the biblical text. For centuries, scholars have discussed the true nature of the serpent, with some suggesting that the serpent in Genesis should be interpreted metaphorically, representing chaotic forces or a rebellious divine being. Other scholars go further and propose that the serpent might not be a literal animal, but rather a symbolic figure, perhaps even a fallen angel or a manifestation of Satan, challenging God's established order. An interpretation that has gained prominence suggests that the serpent is not merely a deceiver, but rather a divine rebel, akin to mythological figures like Prometheus in Greek mythology. Prometheus is known for defying the god's authority by bringing fire and knowledge to humanity. Similarly, the serpent in Genesis can be seen as an agent of knowledge who not only deceives, but also enlightens. From this perspective, the serpent ceases to be just a symbol of ruin and becomes a complex figure with a dual role: tempter and, at the same time, a source of illumination for humanity. Based on this new understanding of the word Naash, we can explore some alternative identities for the serpent in Genesis. First, the serpent may be interpreted as a divine being. Some scholars believe that the serpent could be a divine entity, perhaps a lesser god or demigod, whose presence would not be unusual in ancient Near Eastern mythology, where serpents were often associated with wisdom and immortality. Looking at other ancient cultures, we see that serpents frequently held a prominent place. For example, in Mesopotamian mythology, the god Ninjazida, associated with vegetation and the underworld, was depicted with serpentine features. Similarly, in Egyptian mythology, the snake was a symbol of wisdom and protection, associated with the goddess Wadjet. Second, the serpent can be seen as a symbol of chaos. In many ancient cultures, serpents were considered representations of chaos and disorder, forces that challenge divine harmony and order. In this context, the serpent in Genesis could represent the chaotic forces that disrupt divine creation and test humanity's obedience. This interpretation gains strength when we consider the serpent's role in leading Adam and Eve to disobey God, introducing chaos into the peaceful and orderly existence of the Garden of Eden. Third, a more metaphorical view suggests that the serpent represents the internal conflict of human beings between obedience to divine laws and the desire for forbidden knowledge. In this interpretation, the serpent is no longer an external figure of temptation, but becomes a symbol of curiosity and the search for understanding that resides within every person. The act of eating the forbidden fruit, then, is not just an act of disobedience, but a profound statement about human nature and its thirst for knowledge and comprehension. If we consider the serpent as more than a simple literal snake, this completely transforms our interpretation of the Genesis story. In this new light, the narrative takes on a much deeper meaning, and the act of eating the forbidden fruit comes to represent a crucial milestone in humanity's journey, a moment of transition from innocence to understanding, from blind obedience to conscious choice. This new interpretation also raises fundamental theological questions. Could the serpent's temptation be part of the divine plan for humanity's development? Could the desire for knowledge be an inevitable and essential step in the evolution of human beings? This new perspective encourages a more critical and profound approach to interpreting biblical texts, promoting a richer and more meaningful understanding. Studying the scriptures in their original language and considering the cultural and historical context in which they were written can reveal layers of meaning often lost in traditional translations and interpretations. This broader and deeper interpretation of the serpent leads us to reconsider the role of temptation, knowledge, and spiritual evolution within the biblical narrative. By doing so, we are invited to engage with the text in a more critical and meaningful way, recognizing the complexities and riches it contains. In this way, we can enrich our faith experience and develop a more complete and profound appreciation of sacred texts.